welcome to the channel. This is Nerd.World. Today I am looking at another little walk into the mirror universe, and possibly the original walk into the mirror universe of the ISS Enterprise NCC 1701, the original Imperial starship Enterprise under the command of Captain James Tiberius Kirk, which in that universe is a good name for a Starfleet captain, isn't it? Before we get started, I'd just like to let everyone know about my sponsor, which is Relentless Rebels, who are linked in the description below. And I don't know if you can see it particularly well, particularly considering how much my light just lit up my very pale skin, but I recently received this wolf clasp bracelet and it's pretty awesome, I will admit. And that's, I mean, if it was crap, I would say, I'm not a shill. If it was crap, I would tell you it's actually pretty damn cool. So if you like that kind of thing, they're linked in the description below, and use the promo code NERD20 to get a 20% discount on any purchase. With that said, let's go straight into the video. Okay, just to state the obvious, canonically, we obviously know there's more that we don't know about this ship than what we do know. But what we do know is that it was the flagship of the Imperial Starfleet of the Terran Empire in the 2260s. Like the Mirror Universe, the Terran traditionally had their flagship called the Enterprise. The two vessels had the same registration number, NCC 1701, but their prefix was slightly different, in the Prime Universe it being USS, and in the Mirror Universe it being ISS. Other external differences were minimal to the naked eye. Basically, as established in Enterprise, painted colour schemes on the ships were typically yellow and other such things, so you would see that in other art forms of the ship, but as presented in Mirror, the vessel doesn't seem to have these, but you never see a dorsal view of it, so it may have done, so we'll assume it does, because that seems to have been a Terran thing to have had such lovely paint jobs on their hull. But it may have gone somewhat out of fashion by the 24th century, when we see the ISS Discovery doesn't really have them either. So conjecture, draw your own conclusion on that one. One notable visual difference, and it's an almost blink and you'll miss it kind of thing, is the nacelle configuration of the ship is subtly different. It's very slight, but the nacelles of the USS Enterprise have the nice bulbous ball Bussard collector on the front, but those of the ISS Enterprise have a little antenna sticking out the front, which is more in keeping with those of the Enterprise from the Cage era, under the command of Captain Pike. It could be that the ISS Enterprise simply hasn't undergone the refit yet to have its engines upgraded, or perhaps the Terrans never made that particular leap and kept the older engine design. Who knows? There could be any number of reasons for it. My guess would be just Terran bureaucracy. They haven't got round to doing it yet. The Enterprise is too busy off conquering and destroying. The vessel was, as I said, the flagship. It was under the command of Captain James Tiberius Kirk, who assumed command after he assassinated the previous captain, Captain Christopher Pike, for cowardice or something else that he basically made up as an excuse to get rid of him, and he kept the crew under his thumb via some pretty vicious means. The Terrans typically had some fairly brutal ways of keeping discipline aboard their ships, as Terrans are typically an ill-tempered and very violent group. It required something extra to keep them in line. But the Enterprise seemed to be almost particularly like a viper's den of intrigue and treachery. This could be, as it would, you could argue, would be a response of how things start at the top. Kirk himself was a vicious, cruel, callous, selfish individual, and an officer like that being in command of a ship would likely inspire the officers under him to be very similar. Unlike officers like Captain Forrest of the ISS Enterprise 100 years earlier, who treated his crew with respect, and with the exception of Archer, who would ultimately betray him, the crew were for the most part loyal, disciplined Terran officers without these serious problems of mutinies and other such problems on board that other Terran vessels like the ISS Enterprise NCC 1701 would suffer from. The vessel, though, to keep this discipline, kept armed guards on all decks, which would you would assume in the mirror universe would be more like Marines, not just security officers, although who knows, again, it's more likely anyway. They also used agonizers and routinely disciplined severe offences with the use of the agony booth, which was basically a souped up version of the agonizer, which was capable of shifting pain to different nerve clusters around the body to constantly keep you in a state of continual, perpetual agony, while at the same time stimulating you to remain conscious, to prevent your body's natural reflex to basically pass out under extreme pain from kicking in, forcing you to stay conscious through all the most severe pain that the device could inflict. If you put it up to its highest setting, they could theoretically kill you, but it would still take a while to die in an agony booth. You'd probably end up dying of starvation or thirst before you would actually die of the pain it was causing you. There were always medical staff on hand that if anyone suffered a heart attack or a stroke or other such side effect from the use of the device, they would quickly be revived, patched up and thrown back in. The ISS Enterprise itself would be on many, as Spock would put it, profitable adventures where they would go on multiple military campaigns. The one against the Hulkans in particular was the one where we first encounter the vessel, where they were attempting to bring the Hulkan people into compliance with the Empire, a civilization that really had no possibility of ever resisting Terran control, but they were basically ordered, give us your dilithium, we're going to mine it, just give us permission, do as you're told and everything's fine. They refused, so the Terrans were going to bombard them and probably wipe out their civilization, or at least fully enslave it. This obviously was thwarted, initially anyway, by the presence of Captain James Kirk from the Prime Universe, but after he was gone, it's likely another ship would have turned up to simply finish the job. It wouldn't be as simple as just dissuading one officer aboard the Enterprise. Other interesting adventures it went on early in its career. Kirk would suppress an alien uprising quite early on in his career as the first mission. Later he would travel to the Vega system, to a Terran colony where, although it's not elaborated on, but considering Terran culture, the colony was either in revolt or more likely was simply out of compliance and were rioting or some other thing, and he decided to restore order by killing about 5,000 people. Whether or not those 5,000 people genuinely deserved to be killed, if they were the rioters or insurgents or whatever, or were just 5,000 random people he selected to kill to bring the colony back under control, again, a little hard to say. It's more likely, but considering they were Terran citizens, he wouldn't have got away with arbitrarily killing them, so they must have been somewhat guilty of something, at least something he could put in writing and prove. It's demonstrated that in the mirror universe you can't just behave like a barbarian, you have to actually be able to justify your actions, or you yourself will end up getting spaced. The Empire doesn't tolerate such reckless abandon of its officers. They have to still maintain some level of order and discipline in the ranks, otherwise Starfleet and the Empire simply will not function. Other facts about the ISS Enterprise that are pretty self-evident: it was a battlecruiser, as was the Constitution-class starship in the Prime Universe, but in the Mirror Universe we can assume that the Terrans would load this thing up with as many torpedoes and guns as possible. Even if it only was armed with, and there's no reason to believe it was armed with anything different, with just phasers and photon torpedoes, we see that the Terrans had a penchant for liking pulse phaser cannons as well as beam, so very likely the vessel had variable weapons like that, multiple torpedo launchers that it can be again assumed had a much higher yield than their Federation counterpart, as well as simply more of them, thicker hull armour and stronger shields, as this was the Terran norm. Their vessels were superficially similar to those of the Prime Universe, but were always more heavily armed, more heavily shielded, more heavily armoured, and basically sacrificed secondary scientific systems or safety systems in order to ensure a more smooth, efficient running of the combat and tactical systems of the vessel, as the primary role of Starfleet was to further a sort of, to quote Star Wars, a sort of Terran high culture society, and further the goals and ambitions of the Terran people, and not so much to explore space and encounter new civilizations, with the exception only to find new resources and worlds to conquer in the name of the Terran people and the Empire. So there we have it. the ISS Enterprise NCC 1701. Again, we don't know much about it. We can make a lot of subpositions. It will have been about the same size as a standard Constitution class. There's not usually much variety in that from the two universes. It was probably commissioned at a similar date, but that again isn't confirmed. It was probably designed by the same person in both universes, but again, not 100% canonically confirmed. There is one non-canon thing I would like to mention. I don't know if everyone who's watching this is familiar with a series called Star Trek Continues, but they actually did an episode that is set immediately after the events of Mirror Mirror, but entirely in the Mirror Universe upon Kirk's return, and what happened aboard that ship when him and the other Terrans who'd ended up in the Prime Universe got back.
Space, the final conquest. These are the voyages of the starship Enterprise. Its continuing mission: to discover and subjugate strange new worlds, to advance our dominion and vanquish all who stand against us, to conquer the galaxy for the glory of the Empire.
And it's a very good fan episode. Really good. In fact, the whole Star Trek Continues series was fantastic. I think there's about 13 episodes, I think they did. Without me checking, I think it's 13. And seriously, go check them out if you've not seen them. I won't remember to link it below, but just look up Star Trek Continues, you'll find it like that. And that's it. The thing that is linked below, my sponsor, Relentless Rebels. Please check them out if you would like to. And if you do want to buy anything, use the promo code Nerd20. I think I've said all this before at the beginning of the video. Like, share, subscribe, comment down below. Tell me if there's another aspect of the Mirror Universe you want me to explore, a ship which you'd like me to go into in a bit more detail. As I said, there's not much with the ISS Enterprise. Anything I would be saying in detail, like measurements and things, would all be facts from the Prime Universe Enterprise. I prefer to stick to canonical facts we definitely know about the Mirror Universe ship. And aside from a lot of Earth of the Sword through it iconography dotted around the ship and differences in the nacelles and things we can infer from the more aggressive nature of the Terran people, generally speaking, we don't really know much about it. It's got very similar technical capabilities, but was likely more heavily armed, more combat efficient. The Federation's version would likely have been more scientifically proficient and may have had better engines, as the Terrans seem to have fairly crude engines. So the Federation ship may have been faster, or at least have had better sustainable cruise velocity, or speed at least. Be able to sustain a higher sustainable cruise velocity. That said, thanks for watching if you made it all the way to the end of the video, and bye bye.